On the Prowl. Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of On the Prowl, the Daily Princetonian's weekly sports telecast. My name is Vikram Rao, and I'm Executive Editor for Sports here at the Prince. I'm seated alongside Gabe DeBenedetti, Associate Editor for Sports. Hello, Gabe.
Hi, Vikram.
Well, Gabe, we have quite a lot to talk about today now, don't we?
Yeah, I think we do.
Let's start with the football team. Gabe, have you ever had a nightmare?
I have.
You have. Well, head coach Bob Surace of the football team is having quite a nightmarish season when it comes to injuries. On Saturday, the football team looked to be on the way to victory as they were up 13-0 on Brown at halftime. But then, injuries struck. Junior quarterback Tommy Warnham had been knocked from the game in the second quarter with an undisclosed injury. We'll find out more about that tomorrow. As had senior running back Jordan Culbreth. Well, Gabe, what happened in the second half?
Well, the second half, the team kind of imploded. Brown scored 17 points against Princeton's 0. And, you know, they won 17-13. It really just wasn't a solid performance in the second half from the team. Senior quarterback Andrew Dixon, who has not had a lot of playing time, tried to rally the team, but he really just couldn't do it in the end. They haven't practiced a lot together. And the team dropped a heartbreaker, really. You know, they really weren't expected to do well going into this game. And being up 13-0 at halftime certainly gave them a lot of hope. But
Absolutely.
The Brown Bears came to town and did what they were expected to do, beating the Tigers.
The Brown Bears did come to town, and they did do what they were expected to do. It was an unfortunate finish for the Tigers. Many had feared that Princeton's pass defense, which had looked very bad in recent weeks, would be shredded by the Brown offense, and that was not the case. Princeton's defense held up well throughout most of the game, but unfortunately, offensive injuries, to go along with the defensive injuries, which had taken place earlier in the season, not a recipe for success.
No, but let's also remember that Brown's quarterback, Kyle Newhall, is out now.
Right.
He was the Ivy League quarterback of the year, or something along those lines last year, but broke his wrist earlier this season and couldn't play yesterday. Still, the team's pass defense was good at sometimes, not wonderful at others.
Right.
And again, they just couldn't, stick it out in the end. Next week they'll have another tough task as Harvard comes to town. Harvard, pretty good team.
Harvard, quite a good team. This is a Harvard team that actually got smashed by Brown earlier in the season when Newhall was still playing, but since then has recovered and has looked very dangerous. Yeah. Moving on, the field hockey team had 2 games this weekend, and again, Gabe, we saw a pattern that we've been beginning to see this year with these field hockey teams.
That's right. So the Tigers are number 4 in the country. They played Brown at home. Brown's an Ivy League opponent. The Tigers have been killing the rest of the Ivy League for years now. They crushed Brown 7-1 at home.
7-1.
They will go on the road and play UConn today. UConn's ranked number 5, so just 1 spot behind the Tigers, and UConn pulled out the 4-2 win at home. The Tigers just could not finish, which is disappointing for a team with so much offensive firepower.
Absolutely, Gabe. This is a team that hopes to return to the Final Four, maybe go even further, and right now they had a huge win against Maryland earlier in the season, a team that was ranked number 1 at the time, but since then have dropped a number of games against high-level opponents.
That's right. They have been playing fairly well against teams they're supposed to beat, but there are other high-ranked teams that are playing them very close and beating the Tigers.
Absolutely. Moving on to the men's and women's soccer teams, both teams played Columbia this weekend. One won and one lost. Tell me which one was which, Gabe.
Well, the men's team pulled out a thriller, 3-2 victory over Columbia, and the women, meanwhile, dropped their game against the other first-place team, Columbia. Now, one thing to note is it may be difficult to see if you've just been focusing on the football teams, but Princeton sports has been doing fairly well this fall.
Absolutely.
This women's soccer loss was the first loss of any non-football team, that's varsity and sprint, to an Ivy League opponent. So that means that every other team, except for, again, the football teams, have won all of their games against Ivy League opponents until the women's soccer team dropped their decision against Columbia. They will have a chance, though, to still win the league, as they are still in second place.
Absolutely. For the men's soccer team, this is the 7th win in a row and the 7th straight game in which the Tigers have scored 3 goals. That's never happened before. Looking forward, the men's soccer team, if they were to win 1 more game, would be the first team in Princeton history to win 8 games in a row. Well, Gabe, that just about wraps things up for this week. Thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again next week on next week's edition of On the Prowl.